Everyone boiling soil is making the same mistake, and honestly, it's quietly destroying their gardens instead of fixing them. Most people think boiling or sterilizing soil is the fastest way to kill pests, diseases, and reset their growing medium. But what they don't realize is that this process wipes out the very microbes that make soil fertile in the first place. The result? Weak plants, poor nutrient uptake, and soil that becomes dependent on constant inputs just to function. I've tested this across raised beds, container mixes, and even controlled indoor setups. Every time soil was fully sterilized with heat, plant growth looked clean at first, but quickly stalled. The soil lost structure, water retention dropped, and nutrient cycling basically stopped. Now, before we go deeper into fixing this, let me show you something small that actually makes a big difference if you're trying to rebuild soil properly. I use a compact kitchen composter, the 4-litre electric composter for kitchen, to process food waste into a consistent base material instead of relying on uneven compost piles. One of the biggest mistakes gardeners make after sterilizing soil is adding back weak or unfinished compost. This tool gives you a stable starting point you can actually work with. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. Because here's the truth, killing everything in your soil is easy. Bringing it back to life the right way is where most people fail. Let's talk about why boiling soil backfires more than it helps. When you apply high heat to soil, you don't just kill harmful organisms. You destroy beneficial bacteria, fungi, protozoa, everything that makes soil biologically active. And soil without biology is not soil, it's just a dead medium. In one of my early tests, I took 2 identical containers. Same soil mix, same plants. One was heat sterilized, the other left untouched. For the first week, both looked fine. By week 3, the sterilized soil started compacting. Water began pooling on the surface. The plants showed nutrient deficiencies even though nutrients were present. That's because nutrients don't feed plants directly. Microbes process them first. Without that system, your soil becomes inefficient. And here's the part most people don't realize. Sterilized soil often becomes more vulnerable to problems, not less. So, why does so-called clean soil actually create bigger problems down the line? Well, when you wipe out all microbial life, you're left with basically an empty environment. And, nature just doesn't leave empty spaces alone. The first organisms to move back in are usually the fastest growing, most opportunistic ones, often not the kind you want. I've seen sterilized potting mixes develop fungal issues within just a few weeks, even indoors. And it's not because the soil was dirty, but because there wasn't a balanced microbial community to keep everything in check. Healthy soil, honestly, is never sterile. It's competitive. That competition is what keeps harmful organisms in check. So instead of trying to wipe out everything, the real goal should be to manage and rebuild the biology. And this is where the method really changes completely. There's actually a better way to treat soil, one that doesn't kill it. Instead of boiling your soil, you want to use controlled heat and selective suppression, not total sterilization. This is what I use all the time now, especially when I'm reusing soil in containers or raised beds. Start by lightly heating the soil, definitely not boiling it. Temperatures around 60 to 70 degrees Celsius are enough to knock back harmful pathogens without wiping out all the beneficial microbes. Anything hotter than that, and you start to destroy the whole system. If you don't have a way to control the temperature precisely, it's honestly better to skip the heat and focus on biological correction instead. Because here's something most gardeners overlook. You can actually outcompete bad organisms instead of trying to kill them. Let me show you how to actually revive soil after damage. Once soil has been sterilized, or if it's already lifeless, The focus should shift to rebuilding microbial diversity. This is where most people fail, honestly, because they rush the process. You need three things: a stable organic base, moisture, and time. Start by adding a mix of compost and aged organic matter. A good ratio I've tested is about 30% compost to 70% existing soil. If your soil is heavily degraded, you can go up to 50%. But don't stop there. Add a carbon layer, something like dry leaves, shredded cardboard, or fine mulch. This feeds fungi, which are critical for long-term soil structure. Then water lightly and consistently. Not soaking, not dry, just enough to keep microbial activity going. And this is where patience really matters. You're not feeding plants yet. You're rebuilding soil. What happens over the next few weeks is what most people never see. In about 2 to 4 weeks, you'll start noticing subtle changes. The soil becomes softer and it holds moisture better. There's a slight earthy smell instead of a flat, lifeless one. That smell is actually a sign of microbial activity. In one of my container recovery tests, I took completely sterilized soil and applied this method. After about 3 weeks, I planted some fast-growing greens. The difference was immediate compared to untreated sterile soil. Stronger roots, better color, and more consistent growth. And here's the key detail. I didn't add any fertilizer during that period, because once biology starts working again, the soil begins cycling nutrients on its own. Let's address the common advice that's actually misleading. You'll often hear that sterilizing soil is necessary to prevent disease, especially in seed starting. That advice is outdated. What you actually need is balanced soil, not sterile soil. In hydroponic systems, we aim for control because there's no soil biology. But in soil-based systems, removing biology creates more problems than it solves. Even in seed starting, I've had better success using lightly amended biologically active mixes rather than sterile ones. The seedlings develop stronger root systems and transition better when transplanted. So, if boiling soil is not the answer, what should you do instead? Focus on prevention, not destruction. Healthy soil rarely needs drastic intervention, and when it does, the solution is almost always biological, not chemical or thermal. Here's what I do now instead of ever boiling soil. I avoid full sterilization completely. If I suspect disease pressure, I improve aeration, reduce overwatering, and increase microbial diversity through compost and organic inputs. If I reuse soil, I refresh it with organic matter and let it rest before planting again. If I see pests, I address the imbalance causing them instead of trying to wipe everything out. This approach takes a bit more patience up front, but it saves time, effort, and resources in the long run. Because you're not constantly fixing problems, you're preventing them, and this is where everything starts to shift. You stop treating soil like something to control and start working with it as a living system. That's when results become consistent. That's when plants grow stronger with less effort. And that's when gardening starts making sense on a deeper level. If you've been boiling or sterilizing your soil, don't worry, you haven't ruined it permanently. But the sooner you shift toward rebuilding biology instead of destroying it, the faster you'll see real improvement. This is the difference between short-term fixes and long-term productivity. If you want more practical, tested methods like this, methods that actually work across real gardens, not just theory, subscribe to the channel. And share this with someone who's still trying to clean their soil by killing everything in it. Because once you understand how soil biology works, you stop fighting your garden and start getting consistent results from it.